Hi, I'm Jim Helsing, Artistic Director here at Orlando Shakes, and I want to welcome you to this Orlando Shakes special presentation on Facebook Live and YouTube, our live streamed Q&A that introduces you to our latest on-stage Bear Bard original practices production of Henry IV, Part 2. Tonight, we've got a special treat for you, an interview with three of the actors that are appearing in our production of Henry IV, Part 2, which is taking place at Orlando Shakes through April 24th. Also, we'd love for you to join in on the conversation from wherever you are. So leave us your questions on Facebook about the production in the comments section, and we'll try to get as many as we can as they come through. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you a few members of the wonderful cast we have for Henry IV Part 2. First, please welcome an actor who has appeared in numerous productions here at Orlando Shakes, including Henry IV Part 1. You need to remember that we were in the middle of Henry IV Part 1 when the pandemic hit, and it's 2 years later that we're getting to Henry IV Part 2. So there's a lot of interesting information in those 2 years that happened. So welcome, Lauren. We're thrilled to have you here.
Hello. It's so good to be here.
We also want to welcome an actor who first came to Orlando Shakes as a part of our acting and education intern company for Henry IV Part 1 and and the Three Musketeers, Hayden Palmer. Welcome, Hayden.
Hey, y'all. Glad to be here.
And then we want to welcome a newcomer to Orlando Shakes, but not a newcomer to the works of Shakespeare. Catherine Tickell is here with us. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi.
So take a moment down to just tell me what you're playing in Henry IV Part 2 real quick, and then we'll get into how we got there. Lauren, want to tell us a little bit about the roles you're playing?
Absolutely. I am playing Ned Poins, which I got to play in Henry IV Part 1. So it feels so nice to be back with her and get to finish up that arc. I'm also playing Davy and the Captain, some other roles in this show. So it's having so much fun.
And you're in our patrons room right now. I can see that.
I am, yes.
Arch behind you. Hayden, let's go to you. What roles are you playing in Henry IV Part 2?
Yeah, so I am playing Colville and Pistol. Colville is a messenger for Northumberland and comes in with some bad news at the top. And then Pistol, a very loud, braggadocious swaggerer later on, a character that returns in Henry IV, or it's not Henry IV, it returns in Henry V. So very different characters throughout the play.
Great. And then Katie, tell us what you're playing in the show.
Sure. I'm playing Lady Percy, who's the widow of Hotspur, if you'll remember from Part 1. Hotspur's not with us in Part 2, because of course he was killed in Part 1, but I play his widow. And then I also play Shadow, who is a soldier who's chosen to go into Falstaff's army. And then I also play Prince Humphrey of Gloucester, which is a brother to Hal and a son of the king, but not the chosen prince.
But because he's farther down the line, not the first.
Farther down the line, younger brother.
All right, so let me take a moment to just say thank you all for joining us, and let me set the stage for what the Bear Bard is. So Henry IV Part 2 is being staged in a way that more closely approximates the creation of theater during Shakespeare's time. Now, meaning the Orlando Shakes actors are going to tackle the performance with less than 40 hours of rehearsal, no designers, no directors, just like the acting company of Shakespeare's time. So what we know about Shakespeare's company is there was no such thing as a director. There were no lighting designers. They were performing either outdoors at the Globe or indoors by candlelight, and they didn't dim the candles in and out between the scenes. And although they certainly had costumes, they did 30 to 40 plays in a season. And if Midsummer Night's Dream was tonight, they wouldn't do it tomorrow night or the next day the way we normally do. They wouldn't get back to that play till a month from now. So they were very much reliant on their stock of costumes and just pulling them for this show, putting that away, pulling them for that show, putting them away. So we were more approximating that in a short rehearsal period of time, no designers, no directors, and pulling costumes from stock, which we'll talk about the actors' experience doing that in only 1 week of rehearsrsal. So let's talk a little bit about how we got there and what it is. So I'm going to jump to Lauren first, because you were here for Henry IV Part 1. Just a question before we get into original practices. What's it like to be in the middle of a production wait 2 years and then be able to do the sequel.
It is truly unbelievable. It is unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. You know, we had been doing the rep together of Henry IV Part 1 and Three Musketeers, and we had this great cast bond and, you know, this real ensemble feeling. And to cut it off right before we got to do Part 2, when, of course, going into COVID and all the things that we've all experienced the last 2 years was gut-wrenching. And so getting to come back and be in the same room with these people, and then, of course, our beautiful new additions to the group, has felt like time traveling, like literally felt like time traveling back to the before, and like this beautiful gift to get to put a button on something we started and now we get to finally birth into the world. It feels like a celebration. It feels like coming home, honestly.
So now you're told you get to go back and do a play, but you only have 1 week of rehearsal and there's no director.
Yes.
So what was the preparation that you said, well, I better be ready for this for first day of rehearsal?
Absolutely off book or off role as I could be, right? Learning, getting the lines down. So that was something we didn't have to worry about in rehearsal. That was my number one priority. And then honestly, just really making sure I understood the text and the beats of the scenes I was in, right? Really understanding what's changing, what's at stake, what are the conflicts, you know, thinking through all of those things and just having all that work done ahead of time. Which is normal for me to get the work done ahead of time, but there was a higher stake to like, no, we have to be there and ready to play. You have to be ready to play with someone on the first day.
One of the things, which I think is very true of the Shakespearean actors, was the number one thing they had to be was memorized so that they could get through the blocking quick, figure it out, and then perform the show.
Yes.
That fast. Now, one of the things you mentioned was my part or my role, and that was another thing we introduced. Can you tell me about a little bit what a role is and where the word comes from, and because that was another part of the rehearsal process.
Absolutely. I don't have mine next to me right now, but instead of
you have one.
Oh yes,
Catherine has hers. You want to bring her up on the screen?
Bring me up.
So this role, that is what we worked from as opposed to a script.
Mm-hmm.
So on the roll is not the entire script of the play, which we're used to working from now as modern actors, but just our cue line or the line right before us, the end of it, just a few words, and then our line. So in Shakespeare's time, they would have worked from these roles. They didn't have the whole play. They weren't written down yet. They had their cue and when they talked, and that was it. So sometimes there are huge gaps in the scene, and it's a real listening exercise if you're working from that scroll to just go, did you see the words? Okay, it's my turn to talk, which was wonderful. And that the role, that's where the idea of the role you play comes from, because we learned it from a role, and then also tucking it under your belts. You've heard the phrase like getting a role under your belt. It's literally when you are memorized, you can get that out of your hands and tuck it under your belt.
So we have actors in the production walking around with rolls in their back pockets, rolls under their belts. And then another thing that comes from Elizabethan conversation is, now if I know it well, I have it under my belt, and if I don't know it really for sure, I'm going to stand in the wings and look at the roll real quick and just wing it before I come walking on stage. So that's a live part of ours, and I think you're very right. It's interesting when you only know your own lines in the cue. You don't know when that cue is going to come.
Right.
You know, you're just listening.
Yeah.
Part of what makes it live. Is it nerve-wracking? Were you nervous? What was the emotional state of being in such a short rehearsal process?
Oh my goodness, so nerve-wracking, but in such a great way. It's reminded me of the playfulness of what we get to do. The anxiety was definitely a little higher. I think that the joy of getting to work with this group again helped with just trusting each other. But it's created a freedom actually in that, like, well, it's not supposed to be perfect. We get to play. So we're telling the story. So there was definitely some anxiety, but the emotion of freedom and playfulness has been really nice to bring back into it for me.
Great, thank you. I'm going to kind of go with a question sort of for everybody, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions and everybody. Let me jump to Hayden if I could. Now, Hayden, you were in the cast of Henry IV Part 1 and the Three Musketeers. You come back in Henry IV 2 as a new character, Pistol, who will be both in The Merry Wives of Windsor, which many people saw our production of not that many years ago, and a large character in Henry V, which we'll do next year. So that's an opportunity. But what I was asking Lauren, you know, what was the number one thing I needed to be memorized? So what happens if you forget your line?
So that's a great question, Jim. So the cool part of this aspect, again, this show is, we say in our curtain speech, we say this is live theater. So anything can happen at any moment. We have a wonderful asset in our production. We have a prompter. So in the house, there is his name is Adonis. He's a fantastic actor. He's worked with us on previous shows before. And he is there with the script in front of him. So during any point in the show, if an actor goes up on his lines because we're in a moment or something happens where the line pops out, we look at Adonis and we say prithee. And then he's following along during the entire show. And once he hears that word prithee, he knows to read that line that we've gone up on. So it really gives us as a company some comfort knowing like, okay, we've been rehearsing for 1 week only. We did that preparation of learning your lines before, but when you're in the moment as an actor, especially with this process, we're still discovering things throughout this whole run where we're finding bits and moments. And it's a neat thing to see an actor be in a moment and have that line pop out of his head and then just have that assurance of prithee. And then all of a sudden the line comes to you and you pick it right back up. So it's exciting. And what we're learning is it's exciting for an audience to view that as well.
Now, if you only know your lines and the cue, how do you know the order of the scenes without having the full set? How do you know what happens in the scene or when you enter or stuff like that?
A lot of working it and getting up on its feet. The rehearsal process last week, we started off just with a meeting of, okay, let's talk through this. Let's get some things out of the way, just kind of setting up a language of how we wanted to run the rehearsals. But then it was largely day one. We got up and said, all right, let's start from top of show and work down. And the interesting thing about cue scripts is it forces you as an actor and as an ensemble to really listen. Even when you're off stage and you have that cue script, you don't know when that cue to enter is coming. You're
right.
waiting for those words. So it was amazing. And I think our ensemble really had a fun time because we were there in the room. We were listening. We knew, okay, this scene is coming up. It ends and we go on to the next. We also had the benefit of, we worked out some paperwork. So we had our scenes kind of listed, blocked out, act one, scene one, here's a little bit of what's happening. So as the week progressed, it got into our bodies of, all right, I'm hearing this part is coming to an end. I know I'm about to go on for this next scene. So that's kind of, you learn the cue before your cue to get into your place.
Right. Now, another thing that we know that Shakespearean actors had was a plait or plate behind the scenery back in what was called the tiring house backstage, which listed who was who and in what scenes they ordered. Do you find now, and there's one posted on I think there are a number posted around backstage. Is that a thing that you refer to go, oh yeah, okay, I have 2 scenes before I come in? How has that worked and used?
Definitely. So those are posted when you walk into the theater. They're posted on either entrance doors. Backstage, there are several posted. There are several posted in the green rooms. And again, that's for us to say, all right, they're doing the king's scene right now. So where's that here? Okay, so the next thing coming up is the king's death and the king's procession. So I got to cue that. And a lot of us, a lot of actor managers that we call it, since there are no directors, no designers or something, there are a lot of actor managers on stage. So for those actor managers who have certain aspects that they've kind of clung on to, they look at that and say, okay, maybe this music moment coming up? What's the scene before? And they reference that so they know, all right, we're in this scene. We're about to go into this next scene. There's transition music here. It's a great tool for us to keep track in time of where we're at. So, and we as actors backstage, we use them frequently, at least myself, I can say.
Great, thank you. I want to bring Katie on the stage, and Katie is one of the few actors in this production who has done an original practices production before, which I think is one of our disadvantages. Is Shakespeare's company worked together for many years together, the same 14 actors doing 30 plays this year, 30 plays next year, 30 plays a year after that. Shakespeare wrote 2 new ones. Here's Romeo and Juliet. Let's practice it for a week and add it into the repertory. So Katie, can you tell me a little bit about how you did this before and maybe how it was or wasn't different from now?
Sure. Yeah, so I did this one time before, and I actually did Henry IV Part One, which is very fun. And that's the only other time I've done it. It was thrilling to do both parts in this really extreme way. Um, the first time I did it there, I'm learning as I go on, and the very first time I did it in the first, couple hours or the first day, we had less time. I think we had 3 days, and then on the fourth day, we had a rehearsal and pictures, and then the fifth day was our preview. So there's a little bit less time, and I remember being very stressed out and also excited, declaring I would never do it again. And then by the end, being like, I learned so much. It was just so thrilling. I mean, despite all of the adrenaline, I mean, once you learn to manage it, it's been the thing that's taught me, I think, the most about like actor agency and authentic storytelling and listening. And I just now I know that I kind of can't get enough. So they're different. What I'm learning is that each time you do it, it's going to be very different depending on the play you're doing, the company you're with, your timeline. This company for part two, it was the majority of people's first time, but they also had most of the company had done part one together as a full production. So there already was the language that you need to pull from. I found that we don't have the same type of, companies that where we did 30 or 40 plays together year after year after year, but there does tend to be a lot of crossover in classical companies, like even if you don't know everybody, I think maybe I didn't know anybody when I got here, but it didn't really feel like that because, you run into somebody in the lobby and they've seen a show, or you have a friend in common, or there tends to be a lot of sort of like cross-pollination, and people get friendly very quick. And I find that in this process, everybody, because the playing level or the field, it's equal, you really go out of your way to just draw on each other's strengths and knowledge, so that if there is somebody in the company that has played Falstaff or that has done the show before or has seen it a bunch of times, we start to recycle or use other people's sort of knowledge in that same way that, like, I think they would have done in Shakespeare's time, which I find is really thrilling because there's just not enough time. You want to be most efficient about your work. So kind of like most clearest idea in the room is going to win, or a majority is going to, we're all feeling this way. It really, really works out your tools for collaboration in a very intense way. And both times I've been blessed to be with a very strong company. And I've just learned so much each time. This time around, I definitely felt like I had a smaller role to shoulder. In the first part, first time I did it, I was playing Hotspur. So there were different things to learn and fights. And it was my first time doing it. So I didn't have the ability, I think at that time, to draw on my own my own sort of experience and say, oh, this is what could be helpful here. And now I feel like because I have that, it feels very exciting to try to be of service to other people in the company, to try to be an eye in the room. And it's just everybody's brain in the room being activated is so, so helpful for whoever is on stage, that I'm really excited this go around to have just I feel like my wits are about me a little bit more, and I can just offer, be of more use. So they've been similar in some ways and then wildly different. And I imagine that each time you do this, depending on if I've happened to only do histories thus far in this process, but I'm sure comedies are going to be drastically different as well. So yeah, I look forward to doing more, hopefully.
This process of original practices has become quite popular in American and European theaters. The theater that Katie just finished Henry IV Part 1 in a couple years ago was Pennsylvania Shakespeare, where I've also worked, and I did an original practices, All's Well That Ends Well, a comedy there. Rodney Lascano is also in our company, plays Northumberland. I think we could pop up a picture of him in the show. He is from Colorado Shakespeare, which also does it. They do one performance only of their original practice play, but they're in a 1,200 seat theater. So in each of us are kind of trying different things along the way. The American Shakespeare Center, it came up with the idea of saying prithee instead of line, because we didn't think that was something they would have said. We do have a question coming in from the chat, which is, are you all happy having so many returns? What's it like to have, now our company is 18 actors, of which 15 are actors that were in the show 2 years ago, and 3 of our actors, quite wonderfully, were employed in other productions, doing other stuff, and were unavailable. So let's ask, what's it like to have so many returns, and then maybe on the flip side, Katie, what's it like to walk into a company? You kind of mentioned it, that they know each other, but you don't. What's it like to have so many returns?
Well, I feel like it was a very easy company to kind of fold myself into, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. If I had to take a pause and remember that I didn't know anybody a week ago, which is, I think that is one of the muscles you work as an actor, because especially if you're a regional theater actor and you're traveling around quite a bit, you just sort of learn that you're going to meet a lot of new people right away. And you might have nerves, like first day of school nerves, but that they'll fade and you'll make friends. And I'll say I think it was a strength of this company that there were so many people coming back. And it was very easy, even though I wasn't here with this company when everyone was shut down. I was someplace else someplace else in the world in a different acting company. We all have the same muscle memory of what it was like to be working and having our lives going according to plan, and then have the world close off. And so I was just really honored, I think, to come to this company and be welcomed the way that I have been, and have everybody treat me as though I had been there the first time. And it was not hard at all. They're all lovely, talented people, if I'm going to be honest.
That's great to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just felt like a gift. It really has, to get to putting up a show with other creative individuals always feels there's so much vulnerability and intimacy that comes in making something together, that I feel like any artist will say the bonds you make with other artists always mean so much to you. And I've never gotten to do a show with the same cast ever twice, much less have it be over the period of the last 2 years we've all had, right, which has been so changing for all of us. So happy is, yes, and also an understatement of the word. It feels joyous, it feels beautiful, and I'm so thankful for it, honestly.
And I could say to whoever's asking that question, we're hearing that from audience members too. First preview last night, and so many people were in going, I'm so glad to be back at the theater. I'm so glad to hear the rest of the story. We have our passports and our stamps that you get for each play. I thought everybody's lost their passports. There's no way and like everybody last night, they had their passports with them. They want their Henry 4-2 stamp. They want their dog tags next year for Henry 5. So it was a celebration last night, and I think will be throughout the run, not only for cast members returning, but also for the audience. We have another question coming in. If you want to post that, Michael, up for us, and we'll try to answer it. Did your characters evolve in the time away, or have you learned new things about your characters in revisiting them? Any thoughts on that?
I will say, coming back to Pistol after 2 years ago, Pistol is a very large character. And I think 2 years ago, as Jim said, I was part of the acting education company 2 years ago. I was fresh out of college. It was my first season in rep. First time doing Bear Bard, a lot of firsts for me, and a lot of first in Shakespeare as well. And 2 years ago, I was coming at Pistol with a lot of just, he's just loud. He's just loud. He's loud to interrupt and cause fights. But now, the COVID happened 2 years later, getting to revisit this character is like, no, there's a lot of the language that he says, and he's a loud, braggadocious character, but he mirrors a lot of other Shakespeare characters. I just finished doing a production here, Much Ado, and I got to work alongside Paul Vaux, who played Dogberry, and he had a lot of misspeaks throughout his entire show. And I discovered with Pistol, like, he has a lot of the same things. He's saying one thing, and it's a complete misuse of the word or the phrase, but he's meaning another thing. So I got to experience a masterclass in the previous show that I got to bring into this one. So, and 2 years of getting to sit with that and think like, no, he's not just loud. He's loud for a purpose. Shakespeare writes all of his characters for a purpose. So getting to come back to him and flesh him out more has been exciting and fulfilling as an actor.
I want to move a little bit because I think audiences are interested in. Now, wait a minute. There's no costume designer. What was the process of selecting or using your own costume? And I think we have a couple photos we can bring in. Some are, I wore that last time, and some are, well, I had to make up what that was. I know Jimmy Ireland, who played, this is the bishop, who did not exist in the last one, but the two costumes back behind that were in it. Those are rebels. The rebels in general wear green. This is Jimmy Ireland as the character of Rumor, and Rumor comes out and says that his tongue is telling the wrong thing. So we invited the Rolling Stones into our production. What was the costume? This Falstaff here in his Santa Claus costume. What was the costume experience and pulling and getting it and selecting it yourself like?
We talked through colors in like our limited rehearsal time. We had a moment of like, okay, are we going to decide on team colors? Like for those of us who, had costumes previously, like one of my costumes I pulled because I frankly loved it and wanted to wear it again. That's all there was to it. And for Ned Points. And so sort of the, Prince and the King all being red and the rebels being in the blue and green. And we sort of made that cast decision of put that in your brain. You can use it how you want, right? Like it could, oh, hey, there's Ned. It could have been any way you like, but a lot of us went with that. I will say for like Davy, last minute, I honestly was running out of time in my hour trying to find something. And I was like, low status, tan, hat. Like, it's just like, you're just running around going neutral colors, so, and throwing it all together, which was a fun sort of panicked, like, okay, this is Davy now.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It almost feels like a game show. I'm running out of time. I have to grab a costume right now. Yeah,
absolutely. I think I did something similar with Shadow, which just drifted across the screen. I was like, I don't know, but I think I'm going to need distressed shoes. And I found myself in a box of Nicholas Nickleby shoes. You're sort of like, what can I find? And I'll just make these choices this way and I'll put them and I'll hope they work out. And it was quite thrilling. And I have to say it was very well supported as well by everybody in the costume shop. We still had complete agency and it was us getting our own things, but it was pretty supported in that we had assistants so that I could say something like, I don't know, I feel like I maybe don't leave my house and my shoes, it's my only pair I've ever had. What can I do? Like, where can I find that? And they were like, go this way, look in this box. So that it was a little more, we don't go in and tear up the whole costume shop and make everybody's job harder when they have to put it back together. But I have to say it was very thrilling and very, I thought, exciting.
And just a quickie, also, there's no recorded music in this, which we typically do. If you saw Much Ado About Nothing, we were playing Beyonce and Lady Gaga and all kinds of stuff. Everything was sourced from the actors. What was that? How did that happen and what was it?
So I can talk on that again. So I mentioned this phrase a minute ago, but they're what we called actor managers during this process. So we were this entire company was an actor manager in a sense. We all spoke up and talked about things. And I early on, because we started a Facebook group and just started conversations before this process started of saying, hey, who's in charge of what? Because music is mentioned in this show. There's one clear reference of like music is called for, couples here and there. And so I said, hey, I don't mind stepping in and just managing music. And my approach to it was whenever somebody wanted music or asked or somebody discovered like, oh, there might be a musical moment here, I was there to suggest an idea, propose it to the cast. If anyone else had a music idea like, oh, how about a drum here? I'm like, cool. And then making sure instruments are where they are. And we discovered some really beautiful and poignant moments. One thing that just happened, no pre-planning, nothing on my or anybody's part, I think, but during our process, it happens that a lot of most of the musical moments happen during Jimmy, who plays Henry IV, happens during his scenes, which I think is a beautiful happenstance. It just all of a sudden we got towards the end of a run. And I'm like, oh, these are only happening here. What a cool thing that naturally evolved. Mm-hmm. And it's a technical purpose of, all right, we have to get the show started. We have to get this transition covered. What can we do? So a flourish of a guitar, a drum beat, a flute going off, so anything that would help serve the story. And I'm pretty happy with what we've discovered along the way.
Great. We are actually at our time. I'm going to come back to all of you together. I want you in one word or one sentence. Let me know what's scared you the most. And just real quick, let me tell our audiences, Henry IV Part 2 is sponsored by Orlando Health and the Orange County government through their Arts and Cultural Affairs program. It runs till April 24th. We're on preview night tonight. We open tomorrow, Friday. You can order your tickets at orlandoshakes.org or call 407-447-1700. We have an in-person talk with other members of our cast tomorrow night before the show on opening night. And for our season subscribers, you can bring your passports with you, get your stamps, and get your subscriptions ready for next year as well. Let me come back to what scared you the most, Lauren.
Being bold with no certainty.
Great. Hayden.
1 week of rehearsal.
And Katie.
Alligators.
Right,
Florida.
first time in Florida, coming from Pennsylvania.
First time in Florida.
I love it. And we have a lake right out here.
Right there.
There are no alligators in it, but only sailboats. And those are motor-powered sailboats with little thumb controls. We do have some other questions coming in. If I can hop over to the Facebook page, I'll try to answer them there. All these actors have to get ready for a show coming up in less than an hour now. I want to thank you so much for being a part of it, and everybody online as well. As you can tell, it's a very eclectic, brand new process for us, and we hope you come and we hope you enjoy it. Thank you much.